Yo. All right, so I'm not even going to try to pronounce his first name. D, 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 no, no. See, he's very similar to how I am. If you've watched my mechanics, how this back knee is going to kind of shoot forward over that toe. So you have energy kind of going this way, right? Now, is that bad or is it good? I think the compensations aren't always bad in terms of, I think when we hear the word compensation, we automatically think, oh, that's a negative thing. But you're going to see with him a couple things right off the bat that we see in these clips here. Let's take it one more. Is his front foot position. Okay, so I've done a lot of stuff on rotation into front foot strike rather than rotation then front foot strike. But for Lamet, he kind of has to do this because he has to get his hips going, right? Because as we saw in his initial move downhill, that he's going forward, like towards third base. So he actually is going to have to get these things going and open up a little bit earlier. Now, as I mentioned before, this move can actually create a little bit of rotational energy. It's just about sequencing from here on out now. So you see that the front foot opens. That's actually going to get his hip rotation to go on time, as we see it in this video. Now, I want you to notice how it's a little bit of crossfire delivery, right? If we look at that back foot and then we look at where this front foot lands, a little bit of crossfire, but notice what he did and what he created in his kind of initial move coming down into his anchor point, like trunk flexion, right? Energy forward. Now the lower half has to open up earlier than maybe a normal person or average pitcher, I guess. I don't know. But this is where it becomes extremely impressive because his ability to segment his hips and his torso and his trunk, right, and his shoulders. Because usually what happens with guys, we talk about crossfire deliveries and should I do it? Is it bad? Blah, blah, blah. It just makes it tougher for them to segment hips and shoulders. So we know that hip rotation has to occur, right? Hip rotation has to occur and the trunk has to delay or counter rotate or whatever to create that separation, right? To create that rotational energy storages. So if you're somebody that's, just a typical dude, then this move is actually going to be hard to accomplish because of you're having to pull pretty aggressive glove side because of the initial trunk flexion this way. But like I said, with Lamet, he does it exceptionally well. Whoa, I can't talk today. Frick. He does such a good job at taking this rear hip and rotating it essentially earlier than probably most guys. But notice how he keeps that trunk neutral, right? So if we just look at it here and we look at him coming into front foot strike, see how that trunk stayed neutral for this whole time? Coming down, trunk stays neutral, boom. And now as we anchor down, that's when we take all of this energy and we snap and we release it, right? So then that's when we have the typical, velocity enhancing move, meaning when we anchor down into front foot strike, I'm having a tough time, that this hand comes up. So we're looking here, boom, anchor down, hand comes up, that keeps the trunk neutral, and then boom, we snap it, and then trunk rotation coming through, it's going to pull the arm. But again, I think it's fascinating because like I look at it like, okay, if this was a 16-year-old kid that struggled with velocity and he had this kind of initial move coming down from his leg lift where he shot a little bit forward, then as he went forward, he has to, again, remember, his body has to catch back up on this line. It's organizing itself through space. So what you would typically see from a kid doing that is this glove side would actually start to pull aggressively early, which would then probably 99.9% of the time that I work with kids that do this, that arm would actually come up early, which would then bring the trunk rotation early with the hips. Does that make sense? So unlike Lamet, who, as I mentioned, has an unreal ability to get those hips going fairly early in his delivery, I see a lot of kids who, have a little bit of crossfire. The hips go early, or it actually initiates from the trunk because there's that compensation, right? So then they pull early, and then they don't have the ability to segment hip rotation and keeping the trunk neutral. Okay, so I know I talked a whole lot about a bunch of words that I couldn't pronounce, but in recap, we see him do an incredible job at creating stretch. So, right, so this scap retraction is going to come back. If we just looked at like his throwing shoulder in relation to this rear hip, I mean, that's pretty freaking impressive, right? So, I mean, you see the hip there and the shoulder there. So you're creating so much stretch, man. And that stretch, that separation, that rotational energy, whatever you want to call it, that is a huge, huge piece to throwing velocity. And as I mentioned, I mean, he was born to probably throw 100 miles an hour. But, yeah, I find it fascinating. Like, that's the beauty of throwing a baseball, right? I also found that he separates his hands in a supinated position. So that's neat. Man, I love watching guys throw. Is that weird? So then or hip rotation, he doesn't have much to complete after anchor point, but hip rotation gets completed. That brings now that rotational energy. It's going to bring it through, and what that's going to allow him to do is create a good amount of layback, shoulder, external rotation. He's going to snap through. Freaking fantastic glove side mechanics that again didn't fly out, which is a common thing with guys that start their delivery in more of a forward or third base side shift. So then boom, keeps that glove side in, coming in. Now let's see if we can get this view. You're going to see this leg stabilize. All we got to do is block that energy, and then this hip right here is almost going to shoot back. Boom. Now that's pretty efficient. Trail leg stays long, early pronation, and like I said, he's going to finish his delivery off to this side as his decel mechanism. But, I mean, look at where his front foot ends up, right? So his front foot ends up, and his drive foot was right there. So drive foot there, drawing a bunch of circles. Boom. So if you have complete body awareness and you're an athletic, and this is why I preach a lot of athleticism, right? Because this allows you to do stuff in your delivery that probably a lot of people can't do. Because if I were screening this and this kid was having a tough time with, some energy leakages throughout his delivery, I would say first thing that this foot position, having it open like this as he drives down, is going to leak a little bit of energy because your pelvis has to kind of match that, and he's going to be leaking that a little bit early. And then even in his initial move, right? Like we look at that position there, but it actually can serve as kind of this counter rotation of his trunk. I mean, that's your sign right there, though. That is such a good picture right there. Right? That is crazy. So, I mean, if you're finishing like that, good things are going to happen, right? That's ball release, chest in front of the lead knee extension, lead leg block, trail leg stays long, maximizes hip drive and hip extension, and then boom, decel. And he's going to rotate to give himself more time. Cool. That was a 12-minute video for basically what I wanted to talk about with one thing. If you want to get your mechanic screened, be sure to like hit one of the links up here or something. I don't know where it's going to be. Subscribe to the YouTube. As always, God bless. Love you guys. See you.